If your hydrangeas keep dying, wilting, or just sitting there doing absolutely nothing, you're probably making 5 specific mistakes, and the frustrating part is that none of them are obvious. In fact, most of the advice you'll find online is exactly why your plant is struggling. Today, you're going to learn 5 secrets that most gardening channels never tell you. Secrets rooted in how hydrangeas actually work at a biological level. Not generic tips, not water it regularly. Real, specific, counterintuitive knowledge that will change the way you grow these plants forever. And the best part? Once you set them up right, hydrangeas are shockingly forgiving. Even if you forget about them for weeks, they'll still come back stronger than ever. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly why your hydrangeas struggle, how to fix them even if they look nearly dead right now, and how to set them up so they thrive on near zero effort. These aren't tricks, they're just things most people don't know, and once you know them, you can't unknow them. Number 1, your hydrangea is probably thirsty in the wrong direction. Here's something almost nobody talks about. Hydrangeas don't just absorb water through their roots, they actually lose water through their leaves at a dramatically faster rate than most common garden plants. Those huge, gorgeous leaves are beautiful, but they're essentially giant evaporation panels. This means that even when the soil feels slightly moist, your plant can still be in a water deficit, and you'll never know it because the roots aren't dry. The fix is not to water more frequently, it's to water more deeply and less often. When you water shallowly every day, you train the roots to stay near the surface, which makes the plant hypersensitive to any dry spell. But when you water deeply, really soaking the root zone once or twice a week, the roots chase that moisture downward and anchor themselves in cooler, more consistently moist soil layers. A plant with deep roots can survive a week of neglect without blinking. A plant with shallow roots will wilt the moment you miss a day. To make this work, water directly at the base of the plant, not on the foliage. Use a slow trickle for several minutes so the water has time to penetrate rather than run off. Then, here's the underrated move: mulch. A 3-inch layer of organic mulch around the base of your hydrangea acts like a moisture blanket. It slows evaporation dramatically, keeps the root zone cooler in summer, and reduces your watering needs by up to 40%. If you're doing nothing else from this video, do this. It will transform how your plant handles dry periods. Number 2, the pruning timing mistake that kills next year's blooms. Most people who say their hydrangea stopped flowering didn't do anything wrong with fertilizer or sunlight. They pruned it at the wrong time, and they're accidentally cutting off next year's blooms before they ever get a chance to open. Here's what's happening underneath the surface. Many hydrangea varieties, particularly big leaf and oak leaf types, bloom on what's called old wood. That means the flower buds for next summer are already set on this year's stems before the growing season even ends. When you do a big autumn cleanup and cut everything back hard, you are literally removing the buds that would have become your flowers. The plant looks fine, it leaves out in spring just like normal, but it never blooms, and you assume something is wrong with the soil or the variety. The rule is simple, but it has to be exact. If you don't know your variety, don't prune in autumn or early spring. Prune immediately after flowering ends in summer. That short window, right after the blooms fade, is safe because the plant hasn't yet started forming next year's buds. You can remove dead wood, shape the plant, and cut back spent flower heads without any risk. For varieties that bloom on new wood, like panicle or smooth hydrangeas, late winter pruning is actually ideal and encourages bigger blooms. So spend 5 minutes identifying your variety once, and you'll never accidentally sabotage a flowering season again. Number 3, the soil pH trick that changes the color of your flowers. This one sounds like a science experiment, but it's one of the most practical and genuinely magical things you can do with a hydrangea. The flower color of certain varieties, specifically big leaf hydrangeas, is not fixed by genetics. It's controlled by the availability of aluminum in your soil, which is itself controlled by pH. Acidic soil, around 4.5 to 5.5, makes aluminum more available to the plant, which drives the flowers blue.
Alkaline soil, 6.5 and 7 and above, locks aluminum out, and the flowers turn pink. This means you can intentionally shift your blooms towards blue or pink just by adjusting your soil chemistry, and it costs almost nothing to do. To push towards blue, work sulfur powder or aluminum sulfate into the soil around the plant in early spring, before new growth starts. To shift towards pink, add garden lime. The results won't be instant. It usually takes a full growing season to see a clear shift, but if you're consistent, you can dial the color almost exactly where you want it. There's a practical side to this beyond aesthetics. Plants grown in the right pH range for their variety actually absorb nutrients more efficiently. Nutrient lockout, where you're fertilizing faithfully but the plant can't access what you're giving it, is one of the most common hidden reasons hydrangeas underperform. A simple, cheap soil pH test kit from any garden center will tell you in 2 minutes whether your soil is working for or against you. Test once a season, adjust as needed, and you're ahead of 90% of hydrangea growers.
Number 4, stop fertilizing the way you've been told to. Fertilizer advice for hydrangeas is where most gardening content goes completely wrong. The standard recommendation is to feed with a high nitrogen fertilizer to promote lush leafy growth, and if you follow that advice consistently, you will get a gorgeous full leafy plant that produces almost no flowers. Here's why. Nitrogen drives vegetative growth, stems, leaves, all of it. But a plant that's channeling most of its energy into building new foliage has less energy left to invest in blooms. Flowering is metabolically expensive, and when nitrogen is abundant, many plants, hydrangeas especially, will take the easier path and just keep growing leaves. What you actually want is a fertilizer that's lower in nitrogen and higher in phosphorus, because phosphorus is the element most directly linked to root development and flower production. Look for an NPK ratio where the middle number is the highest, something like a 10-30-10. Even more important is timing. Feed your hydrangeas in early spring as they're breaking dormancy, and again in early summer just before the blooming period. Stop fertilizing by mid-summer. Late-season fertilizing pushes the plant to produce soft, new growth that can't harden off before winter, which makes the whole plant more vulnerable to frost damage and can actually cause dieback that takes years to recover from. Feed early, feed phosphorus forward, and then let the plant do its thing. That's the rhythm that produces maximum blooms with minimal interference. Number 5, the sunlight paradox nobody mentions. You've probably read that hydrangeas prefer partial shade, and that's technically true, but the way most people interpret that advice is causing their plants to underperform. There's a very specific sunlight pattern that hydrangeas thrive in, and partial shade doesn't quite capture it. What hydrangeas actually want is morning sun and afternoon shade, not dappled shade all day, not full shade, not blasting midday sun. Morning sun, specifically between roughly 6 and 11 in the morning, gives the plant the light energy it needs for photosynthesis and bloom production. It also helps dry the leaves after dew, which significantly reduces the risk of fungal disease. The afternoon shade protects the plant during the most intense heat of the day, preventing the wilting and stress that makes hydrangeas look so dramatic and unhappy on hot summer afternoons. When you plant a hydrangea in a spot that only gets afternoon sun, you're giving it the most punishing light at the worst possible time and withholding the gentle, productive light it actually benefits from. When you plant it in deep shade all day, you'll get a healthy-looking plant that rarely blooms because it simply doesn't have enough light energy to support flower production. East-facing garden beds are genuinely ideal for hydrangeas. South-facing spots work if there's a structure or taller plant blocking the late afternoon sun. North-facing beds in full shade are a recipe for leaves with no flowers, almost every time. If you're stuck with a suboptimal location and can't move the plant, there's one workaround worth trying. Reflective mulch or light-colored hardscaping near the plant can bounce some of that gentle morning light around and compensate slightly. It's not a perfect fix, but it can make a real difference in a shaded garden. None of these 5 things on their own is complicated, but most people are getting 2 or 3 of them wrong simultaneously, and the combined effect is a plant that always seems to be one problem away from dying.
When you water deeply and mulch properly, prune at the right time, test and adjust your soil pH, feed with a phosphorus-forward fertilizer in the right seasons, and site your plant where it catches morning sun, you end up with a hydrangea that is remarkably self-sufficient. The forgetful gardener reputation these plants can earn isn't about being low effort from the start. It's about doing the right setup work once so the plant builds the resilience to handle neglect later. Go back and look at your plant right now with fresh eyes. Is it wilting in the afternoon despite regular watering? That's a root depth and mulch problem. Did it leaf out beautifully but never bloom? Check when you last pruned and what variety you're growing. Is the color off or is it refusing to feed? Start with a pH test before you buy anything else. You now have a clear diagnostic framework, and that's genuinely more valuable than any product or shortcut. If any of these secrets surprised you, especially the pruning timing one, because that one quietly destroys a lot of gardens, drop a comment below and tell me which mistake you've been making. It helps me know what to cover next, and you might just save someone else's plant in the process. If you want more content like this, real, specific, science-backed plant knowledge with no filler, hit subscribe. There's a lot more coming, and every video is built around the same principle: less guessing, more growing.